Providing a dose of rationality, critical thinking, and skepticism from a conservative atheist perspective, this is the Bitchspot Report podcast. Every week, your host will bring you news of note and commentary on topics of interest in hopes of sparking intelligent discussion on important issues of the day. It's not pretty, it's probably not safe for work, but we tell it like it is and offer no quarter to the credulous, the gullible, or the downright stupid. It's not for the easily offended or for the religiously or liberally minded, but it is about 90 minutes of secular conservative entertainment. So let's get right to the show. Ding dong, the witch is dead. That's the first thing that went through my head when I heard the Supreme Court did what we predicted a while back. Legalize gay marriage nationwide. It's about damn time. But we'll get to that later on in the show. First, we start off with Christians giving Bibles to the poor to gnaw on. Then a teacher punishes a second grade student for being an atheist. After that, we revisit our story from last week about the fall of the Confederate flag and the stupidity that has come out in support. And last, we talk about Greece and their potential Grexit and what it means for the Eurozone. So slow down your celebrating and let's talk shop. How we doing?
Hot but happy because, as you said, ding dong, the witch is dead. I have to confess, I was worried about the ruling. I was hoping for a good one. I was afraid of a Dred Scott. I was incandescent. The only thing that would have made me happier if it had been a 9-0. But we'll get to that later. But yes, I am a happy camper.
Yeah, well, that was never going to happen. We knew that. But I couldn't care less what we get as long as it's a victory. It doesn't really make a difference.
That's true. The precious tears of rage. Delicious tears of rage.
Yeah, well, they're all a bunch of idiots. But speaking of idiots, last week we talked about Texas pastor Rick Scarborough and his claims that he'd set himself on fire to oppose gay marriage. Well, gay marriage is now legal, and everybody went looking to Scarborough to torch himself. And of course, that's just not what he went. As I said last week, this guy has no balls.
Well, I was actually wondering if he was going to spontaneously combust, but he didn't, so I guess God has chosen not to call him home. And, I'll say something. Guys, you need to take a lesson from the Buddhist monks. If you're going to threaten to set yourself on fire, you might want to consider what happens if someone calls my bluff. Because, we all know from some famous pictures out of Vietnam, those monks, when someone called their bluff and said, what are you going to do? Set yourself on fire? Well,
yes,
they did. Yeah. I mean, they had the courage of their convictions. I'll grant them that. I personally probably wouldn't set myself on fire for, much of anything. But, yeah, and this is kind of a case of, again, we talk about the theater of the religious right. This is it. They want to be persecuted. They want to say we're martyrs, but they really don't want to be martyrs. Because being a martyr is painful and means you don't get to pick up your credit card next week.
Yeah, but you think this guy would have learned his lesson. I mean, is anybody really surprised that he's backtracking on this? I mean, it's just another example of people making stupid claims and then when they're called on it, just turning around and running away. But then this guy turns around immediately and he says that pastors need to get out in front of citizens and say, shoot me first. Well, how the fuck much you want to bet he doesn't mean that either?
Well, no, you'll notice he didn't say he would do it. He said pastors would do it. So I'm presuming it's somebody else.
Well, he's a pastor.
Yes, but he didn't say he would be the pastor to get shot.
Of course.
I mean, in all seriousness, yeah, this is just an example of the, just the moral vacuum that you find on a lot of the religious right today. I mean, and let's be fair. There have been times in the past, hell, Martin Luther King was a pastor. So yeah, he honestly was getting out there, getting shot. Not only was a possibility, but actually, as it turned out, happened. But a lot of these people, it's a business to them. It's the business of outrage, and you can't run a business if you're dead. Sad to say, I think a lot of his fans will be excusing him and, once again, listening to every word he says.
Yeah, and everybody will be pointing out that he's just a frickin' liar, and he will make some other excuse for, hey, I didn't really mean that. Well, say what you mean, dude. Try that.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's one of these things that just really needs to, it's kind of sad. I mean, it's sad that so many people listen to him. But what can we say? We can now officially say that gay marriage is legal in America and Pastor Rick Scarborough is not on fire.
Unfortunately.
Oh, boy.
So, do we have anything else that we want to get to before we jump into some news?
No, I think we got some interesting stories, some depressing stories, but I'm still smiling because of, well, again, the Supreme Court did the right thing. So there's very little this week that can depress me.
And now the news.
Here's someone who just doesn't understand the situation. Christian evangelist Micah Markovich is taking up collection to send Bibles to the starving and homeless Iraqi refugees because, hey, he wants to help. Well, here's a hint, pal. Instead of wasting time with those idiotic solar-powered Bibles, why don't you send them things like food and blankets and medicine, you know? Things that will actually help. This guy's a moron.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, not to mention the fact that most of them aren't Christians. You know, I mean, you know, there's also that, there's the fact that people are starving, and again, it was actually mentioned in the Bible, which this guy will send to people that hasn't read, that one of your first things you're supposed to do is you're supposed to help feed people. You're supposed to preserve people's actual physical well-being. And this guy is a moron.
Absolutely. I mean, remember when the same thing happened following the earthquake in Haiti, and they were sending out these stupid solar-powered Bibles instead of anything that's actually going to help anybody?
Yeah, I mean, and in the article, I would like to point out that there's a group called Action Against Hunger, and it is providing these refugees with food and water. Seriously, if you want to contribute to the problems in Iraq, for God's sake, do something that will help these poor people.
Yeah, well, I mean, this guy thinks he's helping people. That's the thing. I mean, these people are just totally delusional. They're sending these solar-powered talking Bibles that speak in Kurdish and Arabic so that he can brainwash the Iraqis while they starve.
Yeah, and you know, it's one of these things that is, again, like I said, even if you're going from the Christian viewpoint, there's abundant material in the Bible that points out that you're supposed to help people physically. Not just with a talking solar-powered Bible. I mean, hell, it would be better if you were to get them a solar-powered, LED lamp. Because I can guarantee you a lot of people here probably don't have stuff like that. The situation's too fluid. Food, clothing, emergency blankets. The desert gets really damn cold at night. Perhaps if you can't do that, maybe, fund for a database hosted in America so some of these people can find where their families went to. So you can actually keep a database of who is where.
Yeah, but these people don't care. They don't care about people. They don't care about the Iraqis. They care about converting people to their imaginary relationship with Jeebus. That's all they care about.
Yeah. And, you know, you know, it also once again gets into horribly patronizing, especially when we consider a good chunk of this problem grew from the backing to overthrow Saddam Hussein, which was very popular among the religious right in America.
Oh, sure.
You know, we went charging in, we kicked the sandcastle over, and now bad stuff is happening. We left because it was not fun anymore. And you have a lot of the same suspects who are, once again, getting involved, making the situation worse. Because another thing I would say, you're already in a nation where there is a major ethnic and religious conflict going on. You might not want to inject talking Bibles that could make things worse.
But again, they don't care because they think that God will make everything right. And, I mean, to be really honest, this is only slightly worse than the other religious outreach programs we see in the U.S., all the kitchens and all this other crap, where it's all really just bait and switch. I mean, here, have some food, have a place to sleep for the night. But first, let's try some high-pressure brainwashing that if you refuse, we're just not going to give you food or shelter. You know, you get these people that when they're at their most vulnerable and then push a message that, let's be honest, is really, really harmful to these people. It's worse what they're doing to the Iraqis, but it's harmful to all these people. And then they're only doing it. It's a bait and switch. Here we're going to try to buy your loyalty to our stupid beliefs.
Now, I mean, we have to also be fair. Not all religious charity organizations do that, but it is very common among the religious right to have that kind of pressure tactic used. I mean, it's very common. It's a practice of I think they call it witnessing.
Witnessing.
I've seen it at some soup kitchens and stuff like that. I have, in other cases it doesn't happen, but yeah. And of course, it's the kind of thing that again, even if you were a Christian, isn't going to get very many converts. because that kind of conversion by the doctrine, dogma of Christianity is worse than useless. I'm reminded of, there was a history book, I think either Bob Jones University or Rebecca Press. And one of the things it said was that on the Trail of Tears, our, missionaries witnessed to the Indians and brought many of them closer to God. And it's like, yeah, that's probably exactly what they wanted, is they're being marched into exile from their homes. A guy walking alongside of them telling them about how God is such a wonderful person.
Yeah.
But,
well, unfortunately, places like the Salvation Army are famous for shit like this. And it's awful that they're sitting around telling people, hey, I know you're starving, but the only way you're going to get any food is to listen to my religious bullshit. It's completely and totally reprehensible.
well, do we want to go on to the next one then?
Okay, we can do that. Let's go on to the next one.
Fort Wayne community school teacher is being sued for allegedly violating a student's constitutional rights. According to a lawsuit filed in U.S. District Court in Fort Wayne, a second-grade student at Forest Park Elementary told another student that he doesn't go to church and doesn't believe in God. That student was upset by the boy's response, saying he hurt her feelings. Word got back to the teacher, who then made the student sit by himself at lunch for 3 days and ordered him not to talk to the other students because he offended them. We spoke with the regional board director of the Indiana Civil Liberties Union, who agrees that the teacher overstepped her boundaries.
A teacher has no business looking into the religious beliefs of her students. That is not part of her job description, and it flies in the face of our country's attitude toward religious freedom.
The student and his mother are asking for monetary damages and costs. The district is not named.
Speaking of assholes, Michelle Meyer, a second-grade teacher in the Fort Wayne, Indiana area, is being sued because she reportedly segregated a non-religious student because his non-belief in her God hurt the feelings of another student. For 3 days, the child was required to sit apart from the other students while he was told that the other kids just didn't like him because he didn't believe in God. The school district apparently is unaware of this activity and is not being sued, and I hope this bitch fucking loses.
And I will tell you something from a legal point of view. Again, not a lawyer, but I've done some studies in this area. The answer is yes, she will. I mean, seriously, this is almost a definition of using the power of the state to compel a religious identity. I mean, I'm happy that they're not suing the school. It sounds like the school didn't know about it, and she's probably going to be just, completely fired by the school.
Well, she hasn't been laid off. She hasn't been suspended. That's the problem.
Well, they're going to they may want to wait until the lawsuit goes through, but if they do keep her, I would be very, very surprised, because if I was the school's legal advisor, I would be saying, yeah, you realize if she ever does anything like this again, you now have knowledge that she did this in the past, we're going to get sued, we're going to lose.
And they should, but,
yeah.
I mean, this just proves there's dicks everywhere, apparently, and this is totally, totally reprehensible. Worse, there are a lot of people out there who are supporting this teacher because apparently punishing somebody for not believing in God is a good thing. I mean,
well, punishing a second grader.
Well, anybody. They're out there saying that any atheist in any school anywhere should be punished because they don't believe in God, and it makes people feel bad.
Ah, yes, feeling bad. Yeah, I mean, this is a case where, it's ridiculous. I'm sorry, your beliefs do not get to trump the right of other people to, have their beliefs, especially when you're a teacher and you're in a position of authority. This is kind of a ridiculous thing. I mean, and again, just completely, as you said, we'll stick with the abuse of authority here, but then I get back to the fact that, look, do you really want a teacher in class who feels right to bully a second grader? Second graders are tiny. They like come up to my knee. What's next? You're going to try to get Benny points by kicking kittens through a wall?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'd ask how these people would feel if a teacher pulled aside a black student and said their blackness offended other people. But they'd probably be all for that too.
Yeah, and you know what? To be honest, the fact of the matter is that it's not simply what it would feel like. Legally, it is the same. I mean, religion and race are both, strict scrutiny categories Lots of courts have ruled on this. You don't get to discriminate against religion. End of argument. And atheism, does count in that area. A number of courts have ruled for that. So yeah, this would be exactly as if she had pulled a black student aside.
Or a gay student, or a female student, or, the list goes on and on and on. But you just can't do this. And I don't get how any teacher anywhere, and this is not like Deep South, this is in Indiana, which, it's granted religious shithole zone, but I would wonder how any teacher, unless she was the first day in a classroom and had no goddamn clue, would think that this would actually float. There's no way. There's no way anybody would look at this and go, oh yeah, that's actually reasonable. Let's do that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just disgusting. It really is. Because, I'm just stuck on the fact that a teacher thought this was a good idea to do to a child. Because a child, when he's in your class, you are supposed to protect that child. Legally you're in loco parentis. And, you are in place of the parent. The school is in place of the parent. You're supposed to actually try to not make the child's life miserable. And this is pretty much making the child's life miserable. It's really disturbing.
But we get back to these people just don't care. Yeah. As long as they get their little religious heart on, that's all they care about. And now we've got this kid who's just sitting around going, I think everybody in my class hates me. I think everybody hates me because I don't believe in this imaginary friend in the sky. And this could be long-term psychological damage to this poor little kid who doesn't know anything. And this teacher's just imposing this shit from above. And it's reprehensible.
Yeah, not just the child, but all of his classmates who are being taught that it is okay to discriminate because they look up to the teacher. It is okay to pick someone in your class who is different from you and discriminate. Gee, gosh willikers, what is bullying? Oh yeah, that's right. Bullying is picking someone who's different from you and taking actions to make them hurt. And this is the lesson you are giving to however many other children you are in. In fact, I think we should keep watch on this. And if anyone wants to write a letter to the school district, I would suggest you write a letter saying that someone who is engaged in this behavior has demonstrated a complete lack of the moral qualifications that we want to see in a teacher who is exposed to our children for 6 to 8 hours a day.
But probably 99% of the teachers in that school all feel the same way. I bet you that if they thought they could get away with it, all of them would be doing it.
Well, in this case, I want to say feel what you want. But when they're in the classroom, their feels go away. Because this teacher, whatever the other teachers feel, this teacher acted out on it.
But that's the problem, is that these... And it's probably more than just Christians, but I'm going to focus on Christians right now because that's the big thing right now. These Christians, they think that their religious freedom is more important than everything else. Every other right, every other thing in the entire universe is subservient to their religious freedom. They get to do what they want to do because of their religious freedom. Not too long ago, and this still pisses me off. The Catholic Church in Milwaukee, they lost a case where one of their, and I think we talked about this a little bit on a previous show, but they lost a case where one of their priests fucked a bunch of kids, and they were, the courts gave $17 million to the kids, and the church moved a lot of their money into, a cemetery fund so that they could hide it. Then they went bankrupt. And then the church basically said, well, guess what? We don't have to listen to any court case. We don't have to listen to any findings. We don't have to listen to anything because our religious freedom is more important than what the courts have to say. And this kind of shit is everywhere now.
Yeah, and the advantage is, and hopefully what you're going to see, beyond the rhetoric, of course, that's a common tactic when you lose a court case. It happens a lot with everybody trying to move assets around so that they're no longer seizable by the court. But hopefully the court will come back and say, no. Or, to be a little religious, hell no. But yeah, this is a problem in that commonly when a lot of people say religious freedom, not all, let's face it, there are people out there who are genuinely scared for completely bad reasons, but they are genuinely afraid because they listen to the wrong people. But for a lot of people, religious freedom means freedom to oppress. I want to be Christian. I want the freedom to keep that stinking, Jew, Muslim, atheist, / fill in the blank, Pastafarian, out of my community, make their lives hell. And that is really the big issue here because, getting back to the, just to go on to the future with the gay marriage thing, it was never about punishing Christians. It was about granting somebody else a right, but they see that as an attack on their rights.
Well, but it's not their rights, it's their control and their power.
Their control, which they see as a right, unfortunately. I mean, that is really the biggest problem because we would not, we would have very little to talk about on these podcasts if honestly these people were just willing to say, yeah, that's not my thing, but, it's not coming into my house and bothering me, so okay, it's not my thing, but I guess it's yours. But they don't. They want the right to come into your house and inform you that you will conform to their desires because, well, God says so.
And how do they know God says so? Because amazingly, God wants all the same things that they do.
Yeah, and it's one of these rather ridiculous things.
Yeah, well, we are going to talk about that in hopefully lots of detail coming up pretty soon. So maybe we can just go ahead and move on. And I know we're whipping through the news pretty quick this week, but we should be able to make it up later on.
And also it could be an unusual thing we could actually not go over, which would be strange, actually. But since us not going over our limit is very seldom a problem we have.
Yeah, well, all right, so let's go ahead and we'll get to our third story.
The Confederacy is going to live on. The blood is going to live on.
Tempers flared today during counter-protests over the Confederate flag at the South Carolina State House in Columbia, just as the Ku Klux Klan was announcing plans for a pro-flag rally in the capital city. According to the Post and Courier, Klan members had filed a permit for a rally Saturday, July 18th, at the State House to protest the proposed removal of the Confederate flag. In response to the plan, South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley issued a statement saying of the Klan, "This is our state, and they are not welcome."
Last week, and we are actually doing a couple of these where we're revisiting stories from last week because stupid never stops at 1 week. Last week, we talked about the coming fall of the Confederate flag in the South, and wouldn't you know it, the ignorant racists are out in force to support the flag. I suppose we should have expected it, but geez, are these people really this dumb?
Well, I'm looking at their way. And you know what? I'm going to say something. For people who say that the flag is not about racism, you know what I'm not seeing in these pictures? I'm not seeing any non-whites.
Well, of course not.
I'm not seeing any non-whites at all. For some reason, the Confederate flag, and I'm seeing a lot of overweight people too, but that's probably given my overweight status, I should probably not go there. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's like, guys, the good news I'm thinking is that it just looks sad because I'm looking at these demonstrations and the pictures are kind of trying to make them looks like a big demonstration, but honestly, when they do any poll-aways on this, it looks like a pretty damn small demonstration. There were a few things happening in the last couple of days. A couple of governments, state governments in the South are preparing to remove the Confederate flag. So I'm hoping that what we're seeing, honestly, that this is the last dying remnant, to use National Geographic's, of a once thundering herd that ruled America. Because it needs to go away. It needs to go away, go into museums, go into places where people read about the history, and just go away. I mean, my own family, one of them actually, to say how different we are, there was a case where one of my own distant family members had a black man who was actually lynched by being broiled. They didn't just burn him at the stake. They set the stuff up around the stake so that it would actually have a broiling effect to, extend the pain and terror. And they would mail postcards. You actually had lynching on postcards, and to those of you who are younger, well, I didn't live to see this, but, people who think that I'm BSing you, no, you can actually find records in museums of postcards of men murdered that were sent to the U.S. Post Office. That is the definition of proving a crime is committed and nothing was done. Kind of like, hi, welcome to Disneyland, only hi, welcome to the hideous murder of a fellow human being. And it was all done under this banner. Yeah. So, and you know what? I'm also going to say something. Guys, for those of you who say this is the heritage of the South, this was a banner that was up for 4 years during the war, was sort of around until the civil rights came along, and then it popped up again in the 50s and the 60s. If that's the only thing you have that can represent the South is in pretty bad shape.
Yeah, well, I mean, the KKK is holding a rally in South Carolina in support of the Confederate flag. Now, if there was 100 really, really, really stupid things that could be done to support the Confederate flag, this one tops the list, especially by saying, hey, this flag isn't racist. And then you've got the KKK out there going, this is our flag.
Yeah,
this is like bad ideas 101.
Well, it's kind of like saying that the Nazi flag, this has nothing to do about racism. Haven't you seen all the Jewish people marching under the swastika? No, we haven't. You know, I don't know, if anyone ever wants to look, there's a wonderful British comedy thing called the Michael and Webb Show where they actually have a skit called Are We the Baddies? And it's based by, you know, it's set under a couple of SS soldiers, but it works so well for anyone advocating, you know, that this flag is not a flag based on hatred. It really is. I mean, ask anyone who's not white what they think of the flag.
Yeah. I did hear from somebody who essentially what they said was that, I mean, they're not racist. They don't care about any of that stuff, but growing up, the flag was so present in their life. It was everywhere in the South. All of the good memories that they have about growing up, the Confederate flag is part of that, and that's why they don't want to get rid of it. Not because it's racist, not because of any of that stuff, but because their memories of the flag, their memories of growing up in the South were so wrapped around the flag flying everywhere.
Yeah, and this, unfortunately, I mean, the South is really a good example of losing the war and winning the peace. One of the things that's going to happen, and it's going to be a long term. I mean, the first thing is to admit that whatever your personal memories about the flag was used for very terrible things, and it is bound up in that. And the South's going to need to find other symbols, another identity. Because to be honest, I've been through the South. There are good aspects of the South. I mean, you know, but they were all tainted and twisted by the post-Reconstruction era, the 1920s. I mean, 1920s was just horrible. And further on that. And what the South needs to do is ditch this flag and find another symbol, another concept that they can use to bind themselves together. Now, my question is, do you need a regional identity? Can't you just go with a state identity?
Well,
you know?
That's exactly what I was thinking, is why the hell do you need some kind of a separate identity for the South? You don't need some kind of a separate identity for the North or for the West or for the East. Nobody else has these regional flags that they're flying and this individual identity that we're in the South and therefore we're all this single community. I think that is utterly stupid to begin with. I mean, just across the board, that's stupid.
And of course the problem is that it really is only bound up in the Civil War and the Solid South and the racial aspects, because beyond that, the South has a huge amount of I mean, Texas is not Mississippi. Mississippi is not Louisiana. I mean, these are states and local regions that have a tremendous amount of individual variation. So you start running into the problem of, okay, well, what bound the South together? And largely a lot of what bound the South together was first the Civil War, the dependence on slavery, and then, you know, the Solid South against North that progressed all throughout the Civil Rights era. And so, you know, the best thing to do is to start sitting back and saying, okay, what attracts people about our state? Why can't we be proud of Virginia? Why can't we be proud of Texas? Rather than try to focus on this, regional identity that is inextricably bound up with a very ugly history.
See, I don't even think you should be proud of a state. I mean, why the hell be proud of a piece of land you're living on? I'm not proud of California. I think California is generally very fucked up, mostly because it's run by the stupid liberals. But I don't sit around waving a flag going, wow, I'm proud of this piece of ground that I'm on. That's idiotic.
Well, and that is, of course, a bit of history, is that, let's face it, part of the reason we have the states is that originally America was more of a confederation than a nation. Today, of course, it's far different from that. Today, of course, a state has precisely how much sovereignty it's allowed by the federal government, and very few people even think of going to march to war under the California flag. I mean, not to mention most flags, let's face it, could use a little change. I think California needs to have a beer bong and a surfer on it.
Yeah. But, well, I mean, that's not even my point, though. I mean, why would you have pride in something that was an accident of birth? You have no control over what piece of land your mother dropped your fat fugly ass on. You know?
Yeah.
I mean, so why would I go, I'm in California and I'm proud of it? For the same thing, I think, call me a racist if you want. I think black pride is fucking stupid. You have no goddamn control over your genes. That's like saying, well, hey, I'm going to be proud I've got blue eyes, or I'm going to be proud I've got red hair. That's idiotic. Have pride in something you can control and that you actually did.
Yeah, and I mean, you get the same thing in the South with the whole white pride thing. It needs to go away. Because for one thing, increasingly, I mean, we're already becoming a what quote unquote minority state. Mixed race marriages are shooting through the roof. Guys, I hate to say this, but it's not going to be very long as far as history goes before, we will now join the, college of 2 30 seconds white, 4 30 seconds. It's going to turn into a situation where these accidents of birth increasingly become less relevant, which is a good thing, because I really hate to say this, guys. I can't think of any case I can think of in history where marching under the symbol of any race played out well. It never ended in puppies and kittens.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not going to be too long before everybody's like uniform color of brown, and it won't goddamn matter anymore.
Right, and let's face it, another thing is that when we talk about these various pride things, it starts in the 1830s with the rise of scientific racism. Before then, it honestly really didn't matter. I mean, the fact of the matter is that, before then you could have nationalism, you could have individual, attitudes about race, but the idea of this unified vision of race that we've had for the past, 150 odd years, just wasn't around.
Well, I don't even really care for nationalism if you want to go that far about it.
Well, no, I mean, nationalism, just to use something that's going on right now, we're moving up troops and everything to the border of Russia because America can't possibly back down from Russia. Not a good idea. Why are we doing that? Why do we need to do that? Hell if I know, but I would much rather if we would get away from nationalism, especially on a planet where we have lots of nuclear bang-bangs.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's one thing to say, okay, I like what my country is doing, or I like what some country is doing. I'm proud of that country, even though, like I said, pride over something you have nothing to do with is really pretty stupid. But to sit around and do this, USA, America, fuck yeah, kind of bullshit.
Yeah, I mean,
it's stupid across the board, and it doesn't matter what you're doing it about.
And it's harmful because, I mean, think of how much of the USA was used to steamroller people saying, is it a really good idea to invade Iraq? I mean, seriously, guys, is it a good idea to go slamming into Iraq with no good plan of how to get out? Well, they got shut down. We had freedom fries because, the French took a principled stance saying this is not in our national interests. And we said, screw you, you're not following along us. And then USA, 10 fucking years later, God knows how many dead people. We know how many Americans are dead. We're never going to know how many Iraqis or other people are dead. And we set the Middle East on fire. You really need to sit down and say, our nation is a good place because what our nation did. If our national leaders are sitting trying to tell us, do this not because it's a good idea, but because America is great, then you need to tell them to get a fucking clue, go sit down, and come back to us when they actually have a plan that works.
Yeah, because we're all out there flying the American flag, all of them made in China.
Right. Yeah, and also another thing, just to be honest, I know a couple of vets from Iraq, and they say, yeah, that doesn't really do anything for them. You want to help a vet? Why don't you help the fact that when I was off fighting for the United States, because I was pulled out of a National Guard that was supposed to be only for emergencies, I took a 50% pay cut, I'm in financial trouble. No one ever says that. And at the very least, guys, for God's sakes, if you're going to do the ridiculous thing flying the flag behind your truck, get rid of it before it turns into this little stained, shredded rag. I mean, seriously, if there's anything worse than just flying the flag because you want to show everybody how patriotic you are, it's flying a flag that has long since gotten beyond the point where it should have been disposed of.
Yes, there are actually rules for that nobody seems to know anymore.
Right, and really seriously, that will not make you friends among the military. But yeah, this is just a case where I'm hoping this goes away. I am hoping the Confederate flag goes away. I am hoping that the people of the South find other things to be proud in, which there are other things to be proud in. And, we can move on to a nation that is honestly a post-racial society because, again, it has done nothing good for our nation.
Well, but if it's going to be a post-racial society, we have to do that from both sides.
Yeah,
this can't just be everybody going, oh, look at all the white racists. Yeah, look at all the black racists. You know.
I mean, fundamentally, it starts with the government being increasingly colorblind. It starts with everybody being colorblind. I don't think I'm going to live to see it. I mean, in all truthfulness, I don't think I'm going to live to see it. These things take a long time. I think that in the last couple of years, there's been more progress than I thought there was going to be. But, you know, this kind of stuff takes time. So hopefully our kids or our kids' kids will live to see a thing where, you know, the reaction to wanting to get married to somebody of a different race is not just unusually, but across the board is, did he go to college? You know, and we'll see it. I'm certain we'll find other things to be stupid over because Homo the sap really doesn't seem to be happy unless he can obsess over something idiotic. But hopefully we'll get racism out of this.
Well, I wouldn't be betting on it. I mean, unfortunately, you've got, and I mean, I hate to go banging on the liberals again, but, you know, you've got people on the left sitting around going, well, we're going to point out every single instance where white people do anything wrong that we can twist and turn it and call it racist. But shit, man, you can have black people out there going, we're going to kill whitey, and they're not going to say a damn word about it because fuck it, you can't have racism if you're black.
Yeah, and it's one of these things that is just, it'll go away on both sides. I really, like I said, I am optimistic to think that it will gradually go away. I don't know how long, but then again, I'll have to be honest. I didn't expect the gay marriage to happen by this time. I didn't expect to see these people taking down the flags, these states taking down these flags that have been so central to their identity. So, you know, maybe we'll be surprised. I know I have been in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, you never know. You never know.
So, because in all seriousness, everybody if we ever do get to a situation where race just doesn't matter, the nation will be far better for it.
Yeah, but they'll find something else to hate.
The problem is every generation has its own problems. Just as long as we solve our problems and don't saddle the next generation with them, we'll have done fine. Or we can send them talking solar-powered Bibles.
Let's not.
But
all right, well, let's go ahead and do our last story.
Greece may be leaving the Euro, or the European Community Union. There was no bailout extension. There are currently some negotiations supposedly going on. Nobody knows what it is because no bailout talks until the country's referendum on Sunday. This is a case where honestly, part of it is that Greece has always had a problem collecting taxes. The fact of the matter is that Greece was a fairly corrupt country when it came into the EU. There are lots of things in Greece that are not taxable. For instance, one of the reasons you see so many shipping magnates in Greece is that for a long time, shipping companies, cargo lines, things like that were not taxable by law because the people who owned them were able to buy off the votes to do that. Needless to say, when you got to the common people in Greece, if they're looking at all these people who have basically bought their way out of the need to pay taxes, they had no interest in paying taxes either. This wasn't an issue back when Greece became part of the EU because everybody knew that property values were going to be climbing forever and we could get alongside the new economy of the world to be flipping your house every 6 months. Then, of course, the Great Recession hit and holy hell did the radioactive mutant crows come home to roost. Right now, the problem is that on the one hand, Europe wants Greece to impose more austerity controls. And they haven't worked very well in Europe, but, you know, the fact of the matter is that Greece is in hock to German banks. Germany wants those banks to be paid. And that's the problem. Most of these loans are going directly to service debt. Greece is saying they've got a 26% overall unemployment, 60% unemployment among people under 30. They cannot continue austerity or the entire nation's going to melt down. And they have a good point there. The flip side of the problem is what people standing off in the corner wishing both groups of idiots would get together is that, yeah, Europe does have a point. Greece needs to try to get its house in order. But it's not really being helped by demanding all these payments now. And I think that the biggest problem you're seeing here is the experiment of the euro was we have this common currency. But unfortunately, Europe's not a unified economy. Greece is not Germany. I think we can all agree. Greece is not Germany. And Greece can't do what a country could do if it had its own currency, which would be devalue the drachma. Okay, we need to pay these bills. We don't have enough trade. Let's devalue the drachma, so all of a sudden things get a lot cheaper to buy from Greece. Things get a lot more expensive to import into Greece. So, people will be buying domestic, boosting the economy. We can get our house in order like that, and then, just gradually raise and lower the drachma, play the games that every country plays. They can't do that because they don't have authority over the euro. So we've got a referendum coming up that may see something that only a few years ago was said to be flat out impossible, which is a country exiting the euro and the eurozone.
Well, I mean, let's be honest. Greece is really, really fucked up. And the citizens, and by extension, the government, because they voted for the government, they're really entirely to blame for all this. They couldn't live within their means. They spent more money than they had, and they've been living this bizarre liberal utopia. And when the bills came due and the cuts had to be made, the people screamed bloody murder and voted in an anti-austerity government that has borrowed and borrowed and borrowed and borrowed and borrowed with no way to ever pay it back, which, now that I think about it, sounds damn familiar, and I don't know why.
Well, there are arguments. I mean, you get Maynard Keynes, and you get one of the problems, of course, is that traditional economics, and it does work, is that you spend your way out of a depression, and then you save when you're out of the depression. Of course, nobody ever does that. One of the big issues is that, and this is an issue on the European side, the French and the Germans, is you can make an argument, and it's a good argument, that they're saying, look, you need money. Okay, fine. Let's say we pay off your entire debt. And Europe can do this. The EU could pay off Greece's entire debt. Just write it down, say it doesn't exist anymore. The question that has to be asked then is, are you going to make the structural reforms needed? Are you going to rework the tax code so you don't have huge parts of your economy that are just, untouchable by taxes? Are you going to rework the Greek civil service so you don't have these huge problems with corruption? And Europe does not have faith they're going to do it. Personally, even though I don't really like Europe's actions in this, I would have to say I don't really know if I have a lot of faith this could be done, because you're talking about turning against people who have evidently been able to control the way government does things for quite some time.
Well, yeah, but you got to understand that Greece forever has been like this. I mean, they've been like this since the 70s, since the 80s, where, I mean, let's be honest. We talked about Greece being kind of dishonest. Greece fucking lied about their economic status to get into the EU in the first place.
And, one of the problems is that, and it doesn't matter whether the government's liberal or right wing. Greece had similar problems under the right wing dictatorships. They've had problems. One of the issues is that, and this is something that a lot of people are bringing up about Europe, is there was such a rush to get countries in the Eurozone. And we're not just talking Greece. You could talk Portugal, Spain, Ireland had issues. A lot of countries were let into the EU, and they really weren't conforming to the EU standards, and everybody knew it, including the EU representatives who signed those papers. They simply thought that the crows were never going to come home to roost.
Yeah, but you got to remember that throughout the EU, there's a standard. It starts with an M. I don't remember what the name of the standard was, but it says that your outstanding debt cannot be more than 60% of your GDP. Right. And nobody in the EU follows that. France doesn't, Spain doesn't, Germany doesn't. No. Nobody does this. So there's this law that everybody is required to follow, and nobody enforces.
And and one of the problems, of course, is that in all seriousness, the biggest thing, I think, is the question of whether you can have, because I mean, the U.S. has a single currency. No state prints out dollars, but it's different because in the U.S., like we said, states aren't really sovereign. If, to be honest, Texas couldn't crash its economy as badly as Greece has, because Texas doesn't have enough authority to do that. And of course, people wouldn't lose their pensions, people wouldn't lose their Social Security, because that's paid for by the federal government, which has this authority. Europe has this kind of insidious Cthulhuoid mixture of we're a nation and we're not a nation. And I think it's really has a lot of terrible weaknesses that are becoming apparent now, because of course the EU expansion occurred at a time of dramatic financial expansion. And it's easy to add people when you're making more money every month. now we're into the position of, okay, what do you do when a country crashes? And, for Greece, I think the logical answer may be, honestly, to do the Grexit, take the pain, get the drachma back, devalue the drachma to a point, to where they can actually start getting a decent balance of trade again, and then build up from scratch. Other nations have done that. I mean, some nations have done that and done well. Some nations have done that and done poorly. It really boils down to are they going to be willing to address the structural issues that help bring this about? And, the structural issues were there even before the Great Recession.
Oh yeah, well, like I said, it's been there since the 70s and 80s. I mean, the whole country kind of fell apart in 2007 with the worldwide economic crisis. In 2010, the IMF provided a 110 billion euro bailout to Greece under the condition that they implement austerity cuts and dramatically reduce the operating costs of the government. And of course, this was wildly unpopular, ended up causing riots everywhere. They voted out the old government that was actually trying to do something, and they voted in Syriza.
Yeah.
And you gotta remember, this is the coalition of the radical left. Yes, that's the name of the fucking party. So, I mean, I think you can see where this sucker's going. And the new government was completely anti-austerity. The whole thing, it's made up of democratic socialists, anti-capitalists, feminists, Marxist, Leninist, Maoist, Trotskyists, Euro-communists, I mean, this is the kind of party that they have. And Syriza just wants to write off all the debts. They just want to say, hey, guess what? All you people who gave us all this money, we're never paying you back. Have a nice day.
Yeah, and, again, if you could because there's been a number of economists who have said that if you could guarantee they would get their house in order on a nation-to-nation basis, because most of the debt is owed to actually European nations. There's very little private debt at work here anymore because most people with private debt long since, failed. But there is no faith in Europe. There's very little faith. That is one reason I think we're seeing this referendum coming up. It's a move to determine whichever way the referendum goes, you can say, okay, that's a good read on what the people of Greece want.
But the people of Greece want everything to go back to the way it was, where everybody retired early with a full government ride, where they never had to work hard, they never had to do anything, they got free everything. That's what got them in trouble in the first place, that they were living this liberal utopia where they didn't have to work and the government provided everything. And we found out that shit don't work.
Right. I mean, Germany right now, of course, one problem is, again, it gets to different economies. Germany has the kind of monster economy that can support a lot more stuff than Greece does, because Germany's still one of the central heavy manufacturing, it's a huge power. Greece isn't.
Well, yeah, because Germany takes a good chunk of people's money in taxes. And nobody pays taxes in Greece. Nobody.
And that is a big problem. That's why you've got to get to the structural thing. Because, I mean, guys, you can make an argument whether or not you want the European kind of lifestyle. I mean, but the fact of the matter is my friends in Europe, when we talk about, oh God, the government in America took like $12 out of our paycheck. No, if you live in Britain, if you live in Germany, you can expect the government's going to take half your paycheck, just off the top.
More than that.
Yeah, more than that. You get a lot, you pay a lot. And like I said, you can make arguments either way, but you cannot do this if you get a lot and you don't pay a lot. And it's not just the Greek citizens. Like I said, there's huge segments of the Greek industrial economy that are just completely off limits to the government. And that is just not sustainable because obviously, if you have industries that are off limits, if you have groups of people who are off limits, everyone's going to start putting their money in there. Why? They don't pay taxes. It's a logical decision. For Europe, now on this, a big problem is going to be, what happens politically. Because if Greece is part of the EU. Now, still, Greece can veto things like sanctions on Russia, military decisions. I mean, and there is no mechanism to actually kick somebody out of the EU because the EU is supposed to be irrecoverable. Once you join, you're not supposed to ever leave. So now people could be in a little nasty position because if you have a country in that's wanting to exercise a veto a lot, the EU could have a fairly serious problem coming up.
Yeah, well, especially since now, as of Tuesday, Greece has already failed to pay back their IMF loan.
Yep.
They're the first one who has ever defaulted on an IMF loan, and now Spiros is going to send the decision on what to do to the Greek people because he doesn't want to make that. To be really honest, I have a feeling, and this is a young guy. He's like 40. He got elected to run this coalition government. He's, let's be honest, this guy's a pro-communist, pro-socialist. I think he got into office. I think he kind of looked around. He tried to do everything he could. And I think he's finally realized, holy shit, this socialism shit, it doesn't work. And so now he's just throwing it to the people going, what do you want me to do? Because I can't do anything.
Well, and equally, their other point is whatever happens after this referendum, there's going to be pain either way. And I think you can make a very good case that, look, this is a decision that could literally continue to impact Greece for decades. I mean, whether they stay or they go. So I think that you do have a very good point, but no, this is the kind of thing that maybe a leader should say, look, we're going to have a referendum because this is not some little document that, who signed it is going to be, something that nobody's going to care about 2 weeks from now. This is very much like, do you want me to go to war with Russia? Do you want me to do something that could honestly forever change this country? So I will say that the referendum is a good idea. It's an idea to say, because for instance, if the yes vote passes on the referendum, then that the Greek people want to stay in the Union, and presumably after all this, they understand that, there's going to be a lot of pain, and they're saying we're willing to accept the pain. Equally, if it's a majority for leaving, then they must know how much pain there'll be from a Grexit, and they are willing to experience that pain.
Yeah, but not necessarily, because Russia's offered to give them a loan in exchange for leaving the Eurozone.
Yeah.
They want them to come and join their new development bank and just kind of walk away from Europe and America and all the rest of that. They want to, whatever, it used to be the BRICS, the Brazil, Russia, India.
Right.
China, South Africa, but they kind of want them to walk away from the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund and just basically thumb their nose at all the money that they've got and say, screw you, we're not paying you back and we're not part of your union anymore. Adios, guys.
Which is actually a clever move on Russia because, Greece is a part of NATO. That's going to be a very interesting thing because NATO also has no mechanism for kicking anybody out. And another factor is that this gets to, and we're seeing a lot of anger at the EU. And we're not just talking about in places like Greece. We're talking in the UK, Spain, Portugal. The last elections, Eurosceptic parties made major gains. There's a lot of feeling that the EU as constituted today is not democratic, is not responsive to the people. And you're seeing an increasing amount of hostility to it. So, this is a question, and the big question no one can ask is, whatever happens to Greece, is this just something that's going to happen to Greece, or is this something that's actually a sign of things to come with Europe as a whole?
Well, it depends on how they live. If they're going to live beyond their means, then they're going to get screwed because you have to you can't spend more money than you're bringing in.
Yeah, but I'm saying is that if say, if Greece goes and then Portugal, because Portugal has a very big, Grexit, Brexit? I don't know how you would say it, but, Portugal has a big, Eurosceptic party. If the EU starts to shed countries on the periphery, it'll be an open question of how long it will be before the EU ceases to be a factor. And, whether or not, one thing I think a lot of people forget about the EU is the EU was not originally founded as primarily an economic model. It was founded primarily as a way to try to break Europe out of this eternal cycle of conflict it found itself in. Back in the 70s, there was one of the founders of the EU actually said, the achievement of the EU is we spend our time bickering over fish treaties and tariffs instead of shooting each other on the field of battle. And, that is a very important question. So, this could, in the coming years, have a dramatic impact, not just on Greece and the EU, but world politics in general.
It depends. I mean, really, let's be honest. The countries that are not doing well over there, the countries that are having very serious economic problems, they could probably get rid of those countries. But then again, what's to stop those countries from coming around and launching a war against somebody else like they used to?
Well, I mean, in all truthfulness, the one thing, of course, is that the periphery countries, we're not talking about Germany, France, Italy, or Britain leaving the EU. So the fact of the matter is most of the big boys, it could see more instability. It could see a modification of the EU. I mean, there's been some saying maybe what you'll see is a two-tiered system. Because, there are economists arguing that the fundamental problem with the EU is it's trying to treat this radically diverse, not a single nation, but dozens of nations with their own economies, and trying to nail them down to a single common currency, which has deprived many nations of legitimate tools that nations can use to help their economy along. I mean, let's face it, a big part of why currency fluctuations are such a central part is that it helps a country adjust its economy to the changes of the world. So, it's going to be an open thing. It's really going to depend on Sunday. I mean, Sunday's going to be such a big deal. And then what happens after that? So we'll have to see what happens. I mean, the crystal ball is unclear, but it's certain. I'm glad I'm not a European investment banker. Let's just say that.
Yeah, well, I mean, plus Germany's not at all beyond blame for this. I mean,
no.
Germany screwed up. Germany screwed the pooch the whole way. I mean, everybody, the whole Eurozone is basically fucked up in this, and now it's all coming home to roost, and nobody knows what's going to happen.
Yeah, well, because nobody ever predicted this. I mean, and they should have. But again, it was very much, I hate to say it, but I can't get too hard on them because, let's face it, the whole problem, the whole reason for the economic downturn that went from a recession to a disaster in the U.S. was that everybody from, Joe with his house flipping business to, the United States government itself were plugging their fingers in their ears screaming, la, 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 I can't hear you. Every time we had people like Paul Krugman on the left, other economists on the right saying, this whole thing is not sustainable. It is driving right off a cliff. And no one wanted to hear about it.
Yeah, which is exactly the same thing that happened in Greece. But the people in Greece still don't want to hear about it. Right now, they don't want to go. They don't want to have to cut anything out of their lives. They don't want to take any responsibility for themselves. They just want the government to just keep handing them paychecks.
Right. Which is honestly a lot of the problem Europe has. Because again, bailing Greece out would not be difficult. I mean, it wouldn't be that expensive. Greece is tiny economically, and their debt is tiny. The problem I think a lot of Europe has is, okay, we bail you out. We just snap our fingers and make the debt go away, which we can. What happens then? What happens on day two? On day two, do we see the structural improvements, the structural changes that will be needed to keep Greece on an even ground financially?
Well, of course not. I mean, the IMF, when they gave them the money, they gave it to them in structured payments, predicated on, we have to see improvements. They never saw a damn improvement. Never. Because the Greek people are not willing to make any improvements.
Well, and of course part of that problem is, and this gets the differences in governments, is that the Greek government has never been a very good. I mean, it's bribed the people occasionally, but again, it's very difficult to convince someone to pay their taxes if they see the people that have the ear of the parliament or the ear of the current leader who are paying absolutely nothing on a vastly larger amount of money. I mean, one of the core things about any tax regime is it has to be perceived as fair. If it's not perceived as fair, of course everyone's going to cheat, because what idiot would pay taxes when they realize that the taxes are aimed at them to keep the best buddy of the president from paying his taxes?
Yeah, but I don't think that these people are not paying their taxes because they're not fair. I think they're paying their taxes because they've got entitlement issues and they think they just get shit owed to them.
I don't know. It's one of these things right now. Of course, at this point, there's probably people there who aren't paying their taxes because they can't afford it. I mean, that's one of the problems is Greece is in such lousy condition right now. And I don't know what's going to happen because I really don't. I mean, it's one of these situations that both sides are right now playing a game of chicken, and I don't know who's going to blink first. I do know that there's been some statements that, one tool Greece has is that the Russian sanctions are coming up in, I think, about 15 days. And if Greece is still a part of the euro then, they have to vote yes for those sanctions to go through. And to be honest, I'm certain our good friend Vladimir Putin was thinking about that when he had all those nice things to say about Greece.
Yeah.
Because, and that's another question. This isn't just an economic issue. This is a political issue. So it's going to be interesting. It's definitely going to be something we'll probably be looking back into.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be a mess. And, I just look at this going, hey, you want to see what socialism does to a country? Look at Greece. Socialism out of control. All right. Well, anyway, let's go ahead and get on to the main event because I think we're going to talk about that for a while.
Oh, yeah. Ding dong, the witch is dead, the wicked witch. Sorry. And yes, Scalia, you're angry. And I will ask a hippie. So
okay.
Why don't you start on it?
This is the main event.
Now they've gone and done it. The Supreme Court, in a case we talked about a couple of episodes ago, has gone and legalized gay marriage nationwide, something we predicted a way back when. But of course, we can't expect the religious asshats to just accept the law of the land. No, they have to go scream and whine and throw a temper tantrum and proclaim that they're just going to ignore the Supreme Court because God is better than the law. Someone needs to kick these people in the fucking head. What's wrong with these people?
They don't have anyone to look down to, unless, of course, we're wrong and they're right, and soon the rainbow-colored vans will be driving people to gay conversion camps where they will, I don't know, dress fabulously. So yeah, seriously, the amount of paranoia that has been in the air since this decision, you would have think that the Supreme Court ruled there was a constitutional right to open freshly squeezed kitten juice factories. I would laugh, but, it's just ridiculous. I find myself surprised at how people can be so afraid of something that does not impact them.
Because their God thinks it's wrong.
Yes. Oh, and by the way, interestingly enough, I did see a comment not too long ago that asked, if God is going to take vengeance on America for gay marriage, where was he when we were obliterating the Native Americans or holding millions of people in bondage?
God didn't care about that part.
I guess not. Or he wanted them to help the Indians find God when they were dying. I don't know. Yeah, I mean.
God is a racist bastard.
Scalia's ruling, of course, asked the nearest hippie. I love some of the comments about that. Like, it shows how out of touch he is. Ask the nearest hippie is not something that should ever be read from the bench of the United States Supreme Court. It just sounds wrong.
Yeah, well, I mean, it proves just how completely out of touch with reality these people are. I mean, dude, they're hipsters. They're idiots. But they're not hippies. What the hell? And plus, I mean, his whole response was it was proof that the justices have no clue what they're actually supposed to be doing.
Well, his whole response was very much, I don't like this because I don't like it. I mean, he couldn't find very much. I mean, if you're going to say that there's nothing in the court, there's nothing in the Constitution to say this works, yeah, you're right. Except the problem is then the Constitution doesn't fucking work because we do not live in a 17th century, 18th century, massively agrarian, loose federation of states that are themselves massively agrarian. I mean, I would love to see anybody try to make the Constitution work if we just stuck to the way it was written back in the olden days.
Well, I mean, he kept talking about not representing the will of the American people. Well, asshole, you're not supposed to represent the will of the American people. You're supposed to interpret the Constitution. It's your fucking job. Gee, these people don't even know what they're supposed to be out there doing.
Yeah, and desegregation did not represent the will of the American people. Oh, hell no. Because the fact of the matter is, if something represents the will of the American people, it never gets to the Supreme Court because it will be voted on and it will be passed as a normal law. I mean, the definition of defending a right in the Supreme Court is the will of the American people is probably not on board with it.
Well, I mean, if we were doing the will of the American people, we should just put it on a fucking ballot and let the American people vote on it and fire these 9 fuckers.
Yeah, and I mean, the thing is that, the majority opinion was very good, which is basically, yeah, gay marriage didn't used to be legal. Equally, neither did, it's been a while, but there was a time when you could buy a black man. That's not legal anymore. But that was not, that was not illegal under the Constitution. The world changes. Society changes. And equally, there is no demonstrable harm in this case. There is, the limitation, this is from the syllabus, the limitation of marriage to opposite-sex couples may have long seemed natural and just, but its inconsistency with the central meanings of the fundamental right to marry is now manifest. Yeah, and that's a good point, because we are a moving target. Rights are a moving target. The rights, women did not have the right to, own property in their own name. There was a time when if a woman became married, all of her property went right out of her name to the husband. That changed. Should we stay with that because that was the way things were done?
Yeah, but you gotta remember that people like Scalia and Roberts and, all these people, and I mean, it's true of all of them, let's be really honest. These people don't understand the job that they've been put in to do. All of them, they were put in by a political party to do the bidding of the political party to vote their political ideology, and if they can find some kind of a constitutional justification, great. If not, well, hell, it's just their opinion and they can do what they want.
Well, I mean, for a lot of them, like for instance, some of the Kennedy, some of the writers on this decision were Reagan appointees. That's one reason why the court's a lifetime appointment. The idea is that, okay, a party puts you in, we really can't do anything about that, because let's face it, no matter how you try to do something about it, this is appointing a justice is a fundamentally political question. Now more so than ever, given what deadlock the government's in. So, but if you give them the fact that, hey, you're in there for life, now you never have to be beholden to a party.
But they still are.
Well, they're beholden to their own beliefs. I mean, let's face it. This is something that I kind of blame the Democrats for, because this really got started with Bork. Before Bork, most confirmation hearings were very much along the lines of, okay, yeah, we see you've published this, you've done this, you've sat on a federal bench for 10 years. Yeah, you look like you actually know your stuff. Go on off to the Supreme Court. Starting with Bork, and getting much worse on both sides after that, that was when people started to realize, if we can grab a justice of the right ideology, we essentially have done better than winning the presidential election, because the justice is going to be there forever. I mean, you notice it today, because half the time when you hear about people talking about why you got to get your party's president in, it's because he's likely to have 1 or 2 or 3, openings in the Supreme Court pop up. The court has become probably more important than the executive in some aspects.
Yeah, and you don't think for one second that the parties are not whispering in the ears of these justices going, hey, we wouldn't mind if you found this or that or the other.
I am certain they are, but equally, there's been enough decisions where justices have turned against their parties. It works about as well as anything could. Let's just put it this way. It works about as well as anything could. In this case, we had, justices appointed by the GOP, by Reagan or others, who voted for gay marriage. So I think we can say, needless to say, Scalia is probably one of the most partisan judges on the bench. I mean, he really is. I would say Thomas, except Thomas just doesn't talk enough to understand. But Scalia is extremely partisan. I know some people were surprised Roberts voted for this, mainly because they were but Scalia is the one who was looking like he was about to spontaneously combust.
But he always is.
Yeah, well, yeah, he's, but interesting here is that this is now the law of the land. I mean, one thing, the court almost never revisits decisions and overturns previous precedent. I can think of like one case, which was the Jehovah's Witness flag salute case, where they actually turned around and they, in about 2 years, overruled that case. But in the vast majority of cases, the court is extraordinarily reluctant to overturn already set precedent. So this is safe, and no, guys, you're not going to get a constitutional amendment redefining marriage as between a man and a woman. Just not going to happen. If I had $1 for every time somebody screamed, I want a constitutional amendment because the court didn't rule the way I like it, I'd be rich.
Yeah, good luck on getting a constitutional amendment.
Yeah. I mean, and especially since largely it's not hurting anybody. We have not dissolved into, I have not seen gangs of naked gay men and women roaming the streets since the case. If they're Hollywood models, that's cool. If they look more like normal people, please God, no. But regardless, all I have seen is people deciding, hey, we're going to go get married. And then we're going to go home. We're going to have, the honeymoon or whatever. And then when the honeymoon's over, we're going to go back to work. And other than that, no real change. The world has not come to an end.
Yeah, well.
California is not a den of debauchery any more than it's always been a den of debauchery.
Yeah, well. But don't tell that to all these other fucktards who are out there going, well, we're just going to completely ignore the Supreme Court and we're going to do what the hell we want to do. Why do these people have jobs again?
Well, you know what? I'm going to say something. Ken Paxton, you might want to ask Governor Wallace and his famous speech in the door. Or was it Wallace? Yeah, I think it was. You might want to ask all the people who fought segregation during the Civil War and after the Civil War and during the 1960s, because it's hot and my brain just turned off, but during the 1960s, when they said, our cops are not going to enforce this decision, we refuse to enact this decision, there will never be desegregation, and I want you to ask them, how did that turn out for you? Because in all seriousness, the Supreme Court has ruled. It is not a lawless ruling because by definition the Supreme Court has defined what the rule is. And unless you want to lose a lot of money fighting a war that is doomed to defeat, you should probably just accept the damn ruling.
Yeah, well, I mean, as much as I hate the whole authoritarian thing, I really wish that we'd see federal troops roll into some of these places and just go, hey, you, guess what? Come here. Handcuffs. You're going away. All the rest of you fuckers who are out there going, we're not going to do any licenses for gay people. Would you like to go with them? And fuck your stupid religious rights. Fuck your freedom. I'm tired, and I hate to say it like that, but, this whole idea that religious freedom overrules everything else is bullshit.
Well, I wouldn't arrest them because that just feeds into the whole, we are martyrs syndrome.
Good.
But
let them. They can be martyrs in a federal penitentiary all they want to be. And in 20 years when they're still fucking rotting there, nobody remembers why the hell they're there. Let them.
Well, I think that what's going to happen is that the Attorney General said no. Probably right now someone's going to a state court, and it's very likely that the state court is going to say, no, because the Supreme Court has ruled on it. You have to comply with the Supreme Court ruling. If the state court doesn't, they're going to get a writ of mandamus from the local federal court, and then the federal court's going to do it. And most of these clerks, much like our friend we talked about earlier in the broadcast who wanted to set himself on fire until it actually looked like his bluff was being called, they're going to realize they like that $40,000 a year they get. They don't want to lose it. And they're going to sit down, they're going to grumble, they're going to say we're signing this under protest. Whatever they say, and they're going to sign these certificates. And if they don't, they're going to get their asses fired.
And then they're going to yell and scream religious discrimination, and they're going to file all kinds of lawsuits, and we're going to clog the courts with stupid shit that makes no difference.
Yeah, I don't think they will be able to because it's a clearly, they can file a lawsuit, but they can't file it they certainly can't file it in federal court. I mean, what? You're going to file a civil rights lawsuit because you're not allowed to discriminate against someone else's civil rights? They might file it in Texas, but it'll be dismissed because, it has long been considered. I mean, it's flat out said that if you take a job, obviously you assert that you will be carrying out the duties of that job.
Yeah, but it doesn't work that way anymore. That's the problem. It's like the, pharmacists who are taking jobs and then refusing to fill prescriptions for birth control.
Yeah.
And they sit there and go, this is what I'm going to do. And there are people out there doing this on purpose. They're out there specifically going to school for pharmacy so that they can get out there and fight the good fight against birth control.
Yeah, and I think eventually what will happen is you're going to see a lot of them get fired. I personally, if I was running a pharmacy, it'd be automatic fire. I'd be willing to defend it because I think, we'd be found fairly firm ground that if you hire a cook and the cook says, I refuse to cook, hot dogs, you can say, yes, I hired you to be a cook. I did not hire you to be a cook of everything but hot dogs. If the customer wants a damn hot dog, you give them a damn hot dog, and if they don't, you fire them. So, but yeah, I mean, unfortunately, abortion is an area where there's been a lot of retrograde, and I'm not happy about it. But in this case, I think what's going to happen is that these guys are going to end up either getting fired or just grumble, surrender, say how oppressed they are, and then sign the forms. Because seriously, he doesn't have anything. I mean, this guy literally has nothing backing him up legally.
But he doesn't care because all he cares about is his religious freedom.
And the interesting thing is that this is probably going to end up in another loss for the religious right because I expect what you're very likely going to see is if they push it, you're going to see an outright ruling restricting the scope of what you can have for a legitimate religious objection.
Which I would actually welcome, but I don't think it's going to happen with the current Supreme Court.
You know what? I think we got 5 votes. I'd be willing to bet that if it comes up saying I have a religious right not to carry out the duty that the state has hired me to carry out, because, this important thing to remember is that these are not simply private workers. Now, a private employee gets into a little bit different matter. These are state workers who are hired and empowered to carry out state legal responsibilities, and as a state, they have an obligation to conform with the civil rights of the people of the United States. I mean, this isn't like somebody saying, I'm not going to serve your wedding because I don't want to. This is somebody who actually signs pieces of paper that have real legal import in your life. So, that's a big thing. I mean, and this whole thing, now that it's with the 14th Amendment, we're getting all the way back to, YICWO, equal protection in San Francisco, 1800s. And, we're going to see, these people get smacked and smacked but good, because now it's entered into a case where the Supreme Court literally can't decide differently unless they want to overturn a lot of precedent. So,
I don't think that the Supreme Court is going to overturn precedent necessarily, but let's be honest. They did pass the Hobby Lobby case. Yes. They've already set that precedent.
And that is okay, I'll agree with you there. That is very disturbing. That was probably, I mean, we've had good Supreme Court rulings, we've had bad Supreme Court rulings. That was sure as hell a bad Supreme Court ruling. So, I don't think they will, because again, Hobby Lobby was was obviously a private organization. In this case, they would be asked to argue that the right of anyone employed by the government can essentially unilaterally decide whether or not he or she is going to carry out his responsibilities. I mean, it expands from the clerks, because a cop is also a state worker. So are you saying now that if a cop says, hey, I consider your marriage invalid, so I'm not going to intervene in a domestic disturbance complaint because my religion doesn't let me?
There are actually people out there who are recommending that anybody, anywhere, for any reason whatsoever can say they do not want to follow any law they don't want to follow because their religion tells them no.
Right, and I don't think that's going to carry. I don't think it's going to fly in the Supreme Court. I think it's going to be, what I think honestly is going to happen, sad to say, is you're going to have a guy who's going to murder someone, and he's going to use this as a defense, and then much like what happened with Roof, it's going to be discredited, sadly, after someone gets killed for it. Because that's another problem. I mean, we laugh at these people a lot, but I think it's important to realize that when you create this kind of artificial paranoia running around, when you tell people that their children will be taken away to the non-existent gay conversion camp, some people are disturbed enough to take that seriously. Sometimes disturbed people get guns. Sometimes disturbed people go walking down the street and shoot the first person they think fits the category for the person who they believe in their mind is coming after them. These actions, these attempts to make such a degree of paranoia in America, it really is the kind of thing that will help promote violence.
Yeah, but a lot of these people, I think, actually want violence.
Yeah, they want it. I mean, let us remember, it was not that long ago, as far as years and decades go, that judges would accept gay panic as a defense in a capital murder case. Your Honor, I was so terrified. I found out this guy was gay. I had to shoot him 3 times and bury his body.
Yeah, but you actually have a lot of these really religious wingnuts out there who are calling for a new civil war over this.
Yeah.
Now, granted, these are all people who are 200 pounds of flab and, I don't think that they could carry a pack upstairs, much less, 80-pound pack across the...
And, politically, this is one thing I hope with this decision. We're not seeing it right now because unfortunately about the best Republican nominee talk about it was, I think, Jeb Bush and a couple of others that said they don't agree with it, but it's the law of the land now. But really seriously, one of the problems we've had is that the Republican Party has grabbed so many of these people into this, crazy clown car tent. That I think I've said it before, is that there's a lot of people who currently vote Democrat that might vote Republican if they were just voting for what they saw as a small government, lower taxes, business-friendly party.
Yeah, but that's not the Republican Party anymore.
Well, it's not the Republican Party anymore. And even if you could try to make it the Republican Party anymore, it's like a guy I know, he owns a small business, second generation Mexican immigrant. His family's been here since the 1950s. But, he has a real hard time because some of the comments made. I know people who are gay, who are business owners. In some respects, their interests pragmatically would be more aligned with the Republican Party than the Democratic Party. But the Republican Party is the one out there where every damn candidate is saying, hey, you're not people like we are. And if the Republican Party can purge itself of this, and let's face it, it really wasn't like this until, the Southern strategy. And they brought the Dixiecrats on board. But if they can purge themselves of this, we could see a far more healthy political debate in this country where, yeah, you got the Democratic, you got the party of the bigger government. You know, it's not a small government as a lot of people would like, but it is smaller government in the Republican Party.
Oh, no, it's not. There has not in the past 30 years has there ever been a single case where the government could be enlarged that the Republican Party was not on board with.
Well, yeah, that's a problem. But see, I'm not sure what you're going to do with that. But at the very least, if you purge it of some of this, religious stuff, the racist stuff, all the stuff the Republican Party has picked up since the Southern strategy, you may have a better chance of getting people in who want to change the party. Because right now, let's face it, a lot of people who are voting, like these people right now, like this Texas Attorney General, a lot of the people who are terrified of the gay conversion camps, they don't care if the party's big. They want the party to be big. They want the government to be big because that gives the government more authority to interfere in your private life. Which
immediately makes them not conservative.
Right, but the problem is that if the party, as long as they're in the party, as long as they're so dominant in the primaries, the party's never going to be like that. Never going to get better. I mean, the best way to help the party get better is to start getting rid of this, religious cultural war aspect and just start sitting down and having people say, I'm going to vote for the party because it fulfills my pragmatic, not my religious desires, not my fear of the other or the gay, but my pragmatic interests.
Yeah, but that's the problem, is that politics in America is no longer about pragmatism. It's all about ideology. Yeah, that's true of the Democrats. That's true of the Republicans. Nobody gives a shit about what works. They give a shit about what makes you feel good.
Well, yeah, or what makes us the big dog. I mean, we already got people wanting to put more troops on the border of Russia because obviously America's vital interests say that we have to run the risk of a nuclear war with Russia. I mean, there's nothing that says I have the benefit of the American people in line like saying we'll go to war for Latvia. Unfortunately, and then, getting back to this thing, this is why the Supreme Court's become so central, because things are so ideologically locked. And I'm not sure I'm not really sure what could fix it. Maybe get rid of all the gerrymandered districts so people aren't quite so safe. But beyond that, there's also going to have to be a movement on the part of the American people in general to say we're not interested in going with this crap.
But that's the problem, is that the reason it's like this is because the American people wanted it that way.
Well, yeah, we're in a situation. Now, on the other hand, hopefully as we, I'm hoping, for instance, that this ruling will eventually bring the entire question of same-sex marriage and make it go away as people realize the world hasn't ended. And that'll be one more ideological war that will hopefully fade into the background and go away.
Except it won't, because they're still talking about abortion, and that's been out there for 50 years.
Yeah, well, abortion, unfortunately, I think it's going to become, I don't know. I mean, and abortion's an example. I mean, I hate to say it, but when we talk about our ideological wars, this is what concerns me about gay marriage a little bit, is that abortion, we had an honest-to-God terrorist group out there, and it was never called a terrorist group. And I have a very bad feeling that if we do see violence against the same-sex couples in America, we'll do the same dodge and say, well, wait a minute, the person doing that was, white and Christian. He can't be a terrorist.
Yeah, well, that's really the problem, is that Christianity in America gets an automatic pass from the courts.
Right. Well, not just that, but organizations. Because seriously, Operation Rescue should be getting zinged by the, if you were to treat Operation Rescue in the same way the law treats, a good chunk of Muslim charities, it would have been so nuked into oblivion it wouldn't even be funny at this point.
Like I said, the courts.
The courts, yeah. And it is, and not just the courts, but the media, because think how hard the media works to avoid ever calling someone a terrorist, ever calling an American organization a terrorist. When we see the KKK or we see a white supremacist group out there, they usually say a extremist organization. They don't say the terrorist organization.
Well, no, because they don't want to offend any potential listeners.
Right, but that's the problem. I mean, sometimes, you call a spade a spade. And, I don't know. Until that happens, we're moving in the right direction, but we got a long ass way to go.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I don't think it's going to change anytime soon. It's cool to sit and point and laugh at these idiots who are going, we're just going to ignore the Supreme Court. But they can do some serious damage while they're being idiots.
And let us not forget the fact that, when we talk about the joking about gay conversion camps, let's remember, yeah, that's a joke. However, there are still places. It was only within the last, I think, 3 years that California declared that conversion therapy was illegal. That, there are still places where you can send children to if you are afraid that they are gay. Well, they will engage in conversion therapy to make them not gay. Generally, for those of us who are more into calling a spade, conversion therapy is known as torture. If you hurt someone badly enough, they will quite often decide that they will never, ever, ever hint that they are what caused you to hurt them. It also has an unfortunately high correlation with later mental illness and suicide in a person's life because, hey, well, you tortured them as a child. But on the other hand, not to get too depressed, let us be satisfied, or not satisfied at least, but let us at least cheer the victory, because these guys are on the defensive when I am certain that even as little as 10 years ago, they never dreamed they would be on the defensive like this.
Oh, and that's absolutely a good thing.
Because, and yes, you can be forced to act contrary to your religious beliefs. Or to put it differently, the government is not telling you to act contrarily to your religious beliefs. If you feel that your religious beliefs do not allow you to work for the state of Texas in the capacity as a clerk, a law enforcement officer, you do not have to. In fact, the court has upheld that. The court has upheld the right of people to not participate in government activities due to their religion. What the court will never uphold, however, is the right for a person to come walking in, take a job with the government, and then say, oh, by the way, now I will define what my duties are, and you must still continue to give me the full support of the federal and state government. You don't get to do that. If I want to become a history teacher and say I want to teach interpretive dance, I'm going to get my ass fired.
Yeah, but you have a lot of people out there who are saying that's exactly what they want. That they want people to be able to do what they want to do as long as their religion dictates it, and nobody can ever tell them otherwise.
Yeah, and that's, hopefully the court will smack on that. Or hopefully a lot of people will try to get hired and say, I want to teach I want to interview people to see if they want to be Pastafarians. Because, seriously, let's say it's not even religion they want. They want the right for a certain sect of Christianity. Not even Christianity. A certain right-wing sect of Christianity to define how the state interacts with the law.
Right.
Because there's plenty of Christians out there right now, plenty of Christian churches that were perfectly fine with this ruling. So, I don't hear about them. So these people can't even claim that they are Christians. And again, it gets back to the fact, as a certain sheriff said to a guy who was trying to build a biblical, theme park, the Bible says, render unto God what God's and render unto Caesar what Caesar's, and Caesar wants a damn building permit. And in this case, Caesar wants you to do your damn job if you got hired for the job. If you don't want to do the job, I'm certain there's plenty of other jobs out there you can do.
Yep.
So, but I'm looking forward to seeing, I do hope someone spontaneously combusts over that, especially if they do it on YouTube, because it just seeing somebody ranting, and that would actually be a bit of a comment from God. You could say, God didn't blow up the gays, but he did sure enough cause the Westboro Baptist Church to spontaneously combust.
Yeah, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, that would be. So.
All right. Do we have anything else for the week?
No. I just, be interesting to see what happens. Like I said, I think that the Greek thing is going to continue to be, pretty interesting as time goes on. We'll see what happens. Maybe revisit it at least for a news story next week to see what happened with the referendum. And, just enjoy going on Facebook and listening to the rage and terror that, remember this, any minute now, our entire country could fall under the power of homosexual people. And I will tell you right now that if it does, the next day, everything will be the same as it was today.
No, everything will be fabulous.
Everything will be fabulous. Yes, there's that too. I mean, seriously guys, don't try to live, if you need to live your life by how you oppress other people, you need to re-examine your life. But we won. This week, I'm going to take this week we have had good wins this week, and I'm going to be happy about that.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and wrap it up then. And that's all we've got. There isn't any more, but I think you got your money's worth. What do you all think? Let us know in the comments at the website, and be sure to like, subscribe, and share the podcast all over the damn place. Next week, we'll have some more absurd religious and political stupidity to examine. We do it so you don't have to. Pity us. Until then, take care of yourselves. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Bitchspot Report podcast. We invite listeners to interact with the show by commenting on our website at report.jdragononline.com. We can also be found on most social media sites, including Facebook, Google+, Tumblr, and Twitter. You can also listen on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, and Player FM, as well as on the aforementioned website. New episodes post every Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific. Those interested in being on the air, please visit our website. All instructions are there. We appreciate our listeners and supporters. We couldn't do this without you.